Have you ever dreamed of living in ancient Rome or Greece? Strolling through marble temples, watching gladiators, debating philosophy with the greats? It all sounds so epic, so romantic, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that the glorious ancient world you've seen in movies and read about in books is a carefully constructed fantasy. The reality? It was a brutal, filthy, and terrifying place that you wouldn't survive in for a week. Today, we're going to peel back the gilded layers of history and expose the dark, stinking truth about the so-called golden ages of antiquity. What you're about to hear might just shatter your perception of the past forever. Let's start with the most basic thing, your senses. Imagine waking up not to the smell of coffee, but to the overwhelming stench of human and animal waste. In a city like ancient Rome, with 1 million people packed together, there was no sewage system as we know it. People threw their waste, including everything from last night's dinner scraps to the contents of their chamber pots, directly out their windows onto the street below. There were laws against it, but they were rarely enforced. The streets were open sewers, rivers of filth you'd have to navigate every single day. The famous Roman baths? They weren't the pristine spas you're picturing. They were often murky, communal pools of lukewarm water, rarely changed, where people with all sorts of skin diseases and open sores would bathe together. It was less a luxury and more a breeding ground for bacteria. And the noise. Forget quiet, peaceful mornings. Ancient cities were a constant cacophony. From sunrise to sunset, you'd hear the banging of blacksmiths' hammers, the shouting of street vendors, the rumbling of iron-wheeled carts on stone roads, and the constant braying of animals being led to slaughter. It was an assault on the ears, a relentless urban roar that never ceased. There was no escaping it. The very air you breathed would have been thick with smoke from countless cooking fires, forges, and funeral pyres, mixed with the dust and the ever-present smell of decay. This wasn't a world of pristine white marble. It was a world of grime, noise, and overwhelming stench. Now, let's talk about the people. We have this image of noble senators in flowing togas and philosophers pondering the meaning of life. But for the vast majority, life was anything but noble. Let's be brutally honest. Slavery was the engine that powered the ancient world. From the pyramids of Egypt to the Parthenon in Athens and the Colosseum in Rome, these magnificent structures were built on the backs of millions of enslaved people. These weren't just a few unfortunate souls. In some cities, like Athens during its golden age, slaves may have made up a third or even half of the total population. They had no rights, no freedom, and no hope. They could be bought, sold, tortured, and killed at their owner's whim. The glory of ancient civilizations was a luxury enjoyed by a tiny elite, paid for with the immeasurable suffering of the masses. When we admire their achievements, we must never forget the human cost. And life for the free, but poor, wasn't much better. Most people were subsistence farmers, living on the brink of starvation. A single bad harvest could mean disaster for an entire family. In the cities, the poor were crammed into rickety, multi-story wooden apartment blocks called insulae. These were fire traps, poorly constructed and dangerously overcrowded. Collapses were common, and fires could sweep through entire neighborhoods in minutes. Your diet would have been a monotonous gruel of grains, maybe some beans, and if you were lucky, a bit of cheese. Meat was a rare luxury. You'd be constantly battling malnutrition and the diseases that came with it. Which brings us to health and medicine. Forget antibiotics, anesthesia, or even a basic understanding of germs. If you got a deep cut, the best you could hope for was a cauterization with a red-hot iron, without any pain relief. Infection was almost guaranteed and often fatal. A broken leg could mean a lifetime of disability or a slow, agonizing death from gangrene. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous for both mother and child. Infant mortality rates were shockingly high. It's estimated that in the Roman Empire, as many as 1 in 3 infants died before their first birthday, and only half of all children made it to age 10. Life expectancy at birth was probably around 25 to 30 years. Now, this doesn't mean everyone died at 30. If you survived the gauntlet of childhood diseases, you had a decent chance of reaching your 50s or 60s. But the if was a very big one. The world was filled with invisible killers, from tetanus and typhoid to tuberculosis and malaria. A simple toothache could lead to a fatal abscess. The gods you prayed to for healing were often your only hope. And then there's the violence. We romanticize gladiators and epic battles, but the ancient world was saturated with casual, everyday brutality. Public executions were a form of entertainment. Crucifixion, a method of torture designed for maximum pain and humiliation, was a common punishment for slaves and non-citizens. War wasn't a sanitized affair fought by professional armies according to rules. It was total. When a city was conquered, it was often sacked. The men were killed, the women and children were enslaved, and the city was burned to the ground. This wasn't the exception. It was the norm. The peace of the Roman Empire, the famous Pax Romana, was a peace maintained through the constant threat of overwhelming, brutal military force. Step out of line, and a legion would arrive to make an example of you and your entire town. Beyond the borders of these empires, life was even more precarious, with constant raids, tribal warfare, and banditry. Security was a luxury few could afford. Even the laws and social structures we admire were deeply flawed. The celebrated Athenian democracy? It was a democracy for a select group of adult male citizens. Women, slaves, and foreigners, the vast majority of the population, had no voice and no rights. A woman in ancient Athens lived a life of seclusion, passed from the control of her father to that of her husband. In Rome, the father of the family, the paterfamilias, held the power of life and death over his entire household, including his adult children. He could legally kill them or sell them into slavery. While this power was rarely used in later periods, the fact that it existed tells you everything you need to know about the social hierarchy. Justice was not blind. It depended entirely on your status. A wealthy citizen could get away with almost anything, while a poor person or a slave could be condemned on the flimsiest of evidence. So why do we have this incredibly skewed, romanticized view of the past? Part of the reason is the sources we have left. History is written by the victors, and more importantly, it's written by the literate elite. The voices of the slaves, the poor farmers, the women, the conquered peoples, they are almost entirely silent. What survives are the grand histories written by men like Herodotus and Tacitus, the philosophical dialogues of Plato, the epic poetry of Virgil. They wrote about politics, war, and big ideas because that was their world. They weren't writing about the struggles of a peasant trying to feed his family or the terror of a slave in the mines. Their world was the exception, not the rule. And we, centuries later, have mistaken their tiny, privileged perspective for the whole picture. The beautiful white marble statues we see in museums also contribute to this lie. In reality, they were gaudily painted in bright, vibrant colors. We see them as pure and classical, but the ancients saw them as lifelike, colorful representations. Our aesthetic of clean, white antiquity is a complete historical accident, born from the fact that the paint faded away over thousands of years. It's a perfect metaphor for how we view the era itself. We see a bleached, idealized version, stripped of its messy, vibrant, and often ugly reality. So the next time you watch a movie about heroic gladiators or dream of walking the streets of ancient Athens, remember the truth. Remember the stench, the noise, the filth. Remember the crushing injustice of slavery, the constant threat of disease, and the pervasive, casual brutality. The ancient world wasn't a golden age of wisdom and glory. It was a harsh, unforgiving world where life for most people was, to borrow a phrase from philosopher Thomas Hobbes, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The achievements were real, yes, but but they were built on a foundation of immense suffering. And acknowledging that dark truth doesn't diminish the past. It makes our understanding of it more complete, more honest, and ultimately, more human. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the grittier side of history. If this changed the way you think about the ancient world, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives that challenge everything you thought you knew. Let me know in the comments which historical myth you'd like me to bust next. See you in the next video.